Can't decide and torn between a romantic, comedy, action, or an indie film to watch for the weekend? Well. Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast is your ultimate guide to the latest movies. Join us as we dissect the latest on the blockbusters. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast.
Welcome to the GSMC Movie Podcast, brought to you by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Staci.
And I'm your co-host, Sarah.
And today So my original plan with this was, I knew I was going to do Solo. Mm-hmm. So I was like, Solo's going to be an adventure film. So, hey, I have this movie on my Netflix queue called The Adventurers. Let's just put that in. Not really knowing too much about it.
Okay.
But it turns out these are actually both kind of heist films as well.
Oh! So you have a theme you didn't even realize you were going to have.
Like,
That's
how
nice.
Did that work out? Okay, sure.
Well,
whatever.
I'm glad you included me on this episode because I do want to see Solo. I just, never seem to actually get out to the movies or out in general. I don't know. I go to work, I come home.
See, that's kind of the opposite of how I was going into it. Because I knew I was probably going to do it because I knew people would probably want to hear about it. But from the stuff I heard early on about it, I was just like, I'm not looking forward to this movie.
Well, I mean, I don't know how I feel about the movie, but I do want to see it because it is Star Wars. So, just from the previews, I don't know. Could they have gotten someone that looks less like Harrison Ford?
Sure.
Probably. I mean, he could have been... I don't even know. So many things to say, but...
I've now just jumped. I kind of want to see how Ansel Elgort would have done it. Just because he looks slightly more like Harrison Ford. And I was just trying to think of what actor would you have put in that you so desperately need him to look like Harrison Ford. I was like, he looks kind of like he could be his son, at least. Like,
I mean, I don't need him to look exactly like a young Harrison Ford because you're not going to find that. But this guy just didn't scream Han Solo to me in the previews. Now, I've only seen the previews, so I can't say maybe he does better in the actual movie.
So here's the thing. For me, I haven't seen Rogue One. I have seen Force Awakens and Last Jedi, so I've seen all the main storyline films, but I haven't seen the ones we've started doing off to the side.
Right.
And this one actually makes more sense to me without having seen Rogue One, and I don't know what it's about. This makes more sense to me than Rogue One does, because I don't think Rogue One is about any of the main characters, right?
It's not, but it's about what they refer to in the original Star Wars in Episode 4, A New Hope, which nobody ever calls it A New Hope. They always just call it Star Wars.
Right.
When Mon Mothma is going over the plans for the Death Star, and she says many
died to bring us these.
Bantha died to bring us these plans. Well, it is that story. So pretty much going in,
everyone's gonna die.
Everyone's gonna die. Sorry
Hamlet.
for the spoilers, people, but so it's that story of how they get the plans for the Death Star, which then enables them to destroy it in that first movie, which isn't the first episode, but people know what I'm talking about.
There's no such thing as prequels. There's no such thing as episodes 1, 2, or 3. That's totally what I've been told.
Right.
So yeah, again, I just on paper, this sounds like the better story because without having to remember this sort of one line from the movie,
right?
I know who this is about. I know what it's about. I should be able to follow it. I'm already confused almost from the get-go.
Oh no.
In that we start not with a very young Han. It's the one guy playing Han the whole time. So we start with him being teenager-ish age. Sure, whatever. But I'm already, by the end of the film, I was not any closer to kind of understanding what year this is supposed to be.
Okay.
In relation to the other films. I get it's clearly supposed to be before A New Hope.
Right, but how far before?
Right.
And how much younger is he supposed to be?
Exactly, because both the guy who played Han and Donald Glover, who plays Lando,
who looks so much more like Billy D. Williams
he does I'd love to see him do a Billy D. Williams biopic, because he does Billy D. Williams pretty well. But even though he does Billy D. Williams Lando well, they both still look like several years removed from them. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's supposed to be that many years removed from the film.
Right. I mean, they look... To me, this film seems like it's a good, just from the previews, a good 10 to 15 to even 20 years before we see the Han and Lando that we know.
But judging off of what Han and Lando say in the original trilogy, it feels like this should only be like at max 7 years before, and it doesn't feel that way at all, even though it seems like it should be in my version of the timeline that I've tried to. So I'm just like, but then also the styling of it, I kind of like, but then it doesn't help me understand, because at times it seems kind of 70s looking, but then when we get to sort of the main thing and the main heist or whatever, Kira's character especially looks very 1940s.
Oh.
And I'm just like, okay, hey, I like what the costume designer's doing there, and since this is supposed to be before A New Hope, of course we've got to make it look, older style than A New Hope.
Not specifically 40s, maybe?
Right? Since A New Hope was made in the 70s, and what year is this? Where are we? And we start with Han and Kira as teenagers, and then they look like they're in the 50s, so our timeline's all crazy from 50s to 40s to 70s. But it's just like, I don't know how much time exactly is between that and the main story, and I clearly don't know how we got to this part where you're teenagers, because that's clearly not important, even though we show, immediately upon meeting Han that, oh, hey, you're sort of a street smart, thinks on his feet sort of guy, but it's not like we need to know how that came to be. Of course not. This is really more about like Han becoming the quote unquote, I guess, famous smuggler, even though, again, if this is within the 7 years, I think it should be from the New Hope. I'm not quite sure why Hans would be famous.
Right.
Like, there's one scene in here
Has he done the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs yet?
Well, this is the Kessel Run. The Kessel Run is in this.
Okay.
But there's one part in here where he keeps claiming he's this great pilot, but then we never saw it because we kind of just skip over both his and Kira's in the middle story. We don't need to, see what happened in that part, even though this is supposedly where Han learned to fly. We don't need to see that. The greatest pilot learned to fly, what? But at one point someone comments, oh, wow, you really are a great pilot. And at that point, I'm like, wait, why? Why do you say that? The only thing he's done, because you were the pilot and you wouldn't let him fly, the only thing he's done is sort of straighten a ship that can still fly pretty well that was slightly tilting. I was like, I'm pretty sure I could do that and I can't fly anything. Like, what does that make him a great pilot for? And it's just, the story of this is, I'm trying not to spoil, because there is something in this where, again, throws me off of, where does this tie in with the original trilogy? But we kind of clearly, after the original trilogy, we're just like, we kind of ignored what we did. We set up a world, but we're not going to pay too much attention to it. Mm-hmm. Because I will always drive my mother crazy whenever we watch, if Empire Strikes Back comes on, mm-hmm. because Luke goes to study with Yoda,
Right.
And he's like, he did that because Obi-Wan told him, oh, you have to go study with the Jedi who trained me, Yoda. And I'm like, but in the prequels, that's not who trained you. We have Qui-Gon for no apparent reason. It's like, did the people who wrote the prequels even read? Like, in TV shows, they have, the Bible or whatever.
Right.
Where everything about these characters is written. So if it's mentioned one time that so-and-so has a brother named Jerry, we know that. And it doesn't seem Star Wars followed that at all. It was just like, oh, I've forgotten. I'm not going to rewatch them or anything. I'll just write it as I go. And it's just like, it's this again. I'm just like, your history is a little fuzzy tying into the original trilogy, which of all the Star Wars films, we all seem to agree, okay, that exists. The prequels may or may not exist. 7 and 8 may or may not exist, depending on the fans. But 4, 5, and 6 seem to exist, and you're not quite following that storyline. And of all the things, I feel very sort of sorry for some of the cast members. Mm-hmm. And I know from things I heard that this was a troubled production and the directors changed and a lot of things were going on there. So I feel sort of sorry for a good amount of the cast. Thandie Newton is in this, and I especially feel sorry for her. Like, they just completely do not use her character well at all. I'm just like... And then Woody Harrelson's in it, and maybe it's just, this is how I view Woody Harrelson for a good amount of the time. It kind of feels like a slightly more sober Hamish Nice. Because he serves as a mentor to Han. So I'm just like, so it's you, but without all the drinking and your hair's been cut.
Oh,
okay.
And maybe he took a shower.
Right?
Or maybe not.
I'm just like, but it's just like, I can't, what is going on?
Well, I am, because I am the person that looks stuff up. I'm looking at an article that somebody... I love people. I love nerdy people too, especially because so they were trying to figure out when this took place also. And they have a whole system. I mean, okay, so they're talking about when Luke et al. Blow up the original Death Star.
Right.
And they're calling that the Battle of Yavin, named after Yavin 4, the moon where the rebel base was located, marks year 0 in the series timeline. So then he goes, everything is either before the Battle of Yavin BBY or after the Battle of Yavin ABY. And then I haven't read beyond that because I was just laughing. This is specific and very detailed. If I get to an actual like where this is, I'll let you know. But I just had to share that we've got not BC or BCE, but we have got BBY.
Well, and I love people who do try and go and make sense of Star Wars, even though we're clearly not following a timeline with the prequels. Because I saw on Twitter someone went through and ranked all the Star Wars films prior to Solo, because it hadn't come out at that time, by the percent of time that a woman who had a speaking role was on screen.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
and
wow.
No movie gets more than 43%, including Rogue One, in which I believe she's the main character, as well as the 2 in which we have Rey going around.
Wow.
And A New Hope actually has the least.
Oh, I'm sure.
Which I'm just like, but
there's, like 2 women with speaking roles in that movie.
But I also
3
really
maybe.
like to know, going through even how much time they were actually spent speaking. Because when I read it, I thought it was how much time they were speaking, not that they were speaking roles. And so I was like a little confused, and I was thinking, I mean, for most of the Jabba the Hutt scene at the beginning of Return of the Jedi, Leia's there, but she doesn't say too much. She's just there in the metal bikini. It's just like, you're there to be looked at again.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it feels with this film. Like, there's a lot of looking at Kira, and I'm forgetting the actress's name, but she's from Game of Thrones. Where
is it go ahead, never mind.
Yeah,
I think I know who you mean, but
so it's mentioned a couple of times by a few different characters that Kira has done a number of bad things since the last time she saw Han, but we never get what that is. We never even get like a hint. There's one moment where she evidently takes out someone with this really cool martial arts move, but it's done behind a door, and we're looking through the window at L3, which is a droid, and so we don't see it, and all we see is L3 go, whoa. And I'm like, really? I'm much more interested in a Lando backstory or a Kira backstory or an L3 backstory than this Han Solo movie. And you're not giving me anything about that.
Okay, what about Chewie? Do we get into any of Chewie's backstory? Because if you have read any of the books, which are no longer canon because Disney, but there is some interesting backstory with Chewie and his people.
Well, see, and I wonder if it's because of Disney that this is in the same way with all the Marvel films now, where you can't just, if you only want to watch the Avengers films, only watch the Avengers films. You have to go see the different solo superhero movies for that. It feels sort of that way because there's at least one thing, and I'm not a big enough Star Wars fans to know if there's more than one thing, but there is at least one thing in this film that will confuse you if the only things you've seen are the main movies. Because I had to look it up, and it was explained that it comes from the Clone Wars cartoon. Which I didn't watch, and I didn't know was considered canon, but that comes up, and I'm just like...
it actually is.
What?
Amelia Clark is the actress's name that you were... Yes. And I was right. I was going to say Mother of Dragons, but I couldn't think of her real name.
Neither of her names.
Right.
But yes, that lady. So yeah, it's just like, I don't know what the film... And again, troubled production, so give a lot to that. There's a number of things that they're just sort of... The screenwriters wrote without really, like, even beyond the we're not going to pay attention to what we said in the original trilogy thing, the whole heist of this movie is about hyperfuel, which threw me off. It comes up, like, almost immediately in the movie, and I'm just like, did we ever in any Star Wars film mention that you needed a special fuel to jump to hyperdrive? Wasn't it just you jumped to hyperdrive?
It's not like dust and crops, but...
Like, you need a special fuel just to... We never talk about that, but that's what the whole film's about. There is Chewbacca, but we don't really get how Chewbacca got there. He just shows up, and then he and Han get together. And from something we see later, it seems there's clearly been a story since the attack on the Wookiees that we saw in whichever prequel when the clones were turned against the Jedi. And I guess part of that has to do with Chewbacca. No idea how Chewbacca got to where he is. Just like a lot where it's just like, yeah, we don't know. Like if you see the preview, there's a scene with a train that's on both sides of the tracks.
Right.
And that's super cool. But my thought as I was watching that is, wait, how does that work gravitationally?
Right.
Like magnetically, but what about the people in the lower car? Are you upside down the whole time? And it's just like things like that where I'm like, I am out of this film enough to be questioning the like logistics of this, and you don't give me anything. You don't give me enough to draw me in, and then you don't give me things that actually make sense. So there has been talk about Donald Glover getting his own Lando film, which I'd be much more interested to know about. There's a moment in this where he's talking to a sort of voice recorder, and he's like, the Calrissian Chronicles, volume whatever. I'm like, what is that? You just mentioned that, and it's supposed to be a joke, but I'm much more interested in the Calrissian Chronicles than this movie I'm watching right now. Like, there's a problem.
Although in the grand scheme of things, well, Lando has, kind of it's not a hugely major role, but
right.
The backstory of Lando isn't necessarily as important as some of the other backstories,
and I'm
but
much more
it
interested.
Sounds right.
Like, I want to know what's with the capes, and how did we get all the capes? Where did this love for capes? Because we get the backstory for Han of the Kessel Run, and how he got Lando's ship, which was in the trilogy. What did you do with my ship and all that? And it's not your ship and all that. We get how that happened. And so you would think, oh, hey, I feel so connected to Han now that I understand more. And I'm like, no. No, I feel... of anything, A, the timing's off, so I'm a little off. B, this is continuing the thing of Star Wars where they're all ridiculously conveniently connected. So like it's hinting at how we get to the start of A New Hope, because Han's decided, hey, let's go do that job on Tatooine. Because of course,
right.
We have to go to Tatooine. There's in this galaxy of however many planets, there's only like the however many we're going to deal with, so long as the main characters are there. They don't exist. It was just like, really? Really? And then the only thing that I kind of liked about this is I feel it kind of gives weight. There's something in the film that happens that kind of gives weight to that whole ridiculous debate about whether or not Han shot first for Guido. And that's like the best thing I actually like about Han in this film is, aha, I feel we've solved that debate.
Okay.
And the rest, I'm like, I want to know about Lando. I want to know about L3, who is possibly my favorite character in this film. She's a droid, but she's like she made me think of like a militant feminist from like the 70s, because she's very against like, I want to call it droid slavery, but I don't know how that means, of droids having freedom, of being treated the same as other people. And she's quite snarky and wonderful, and I'm dying to know about how she and Lando got together and their whole history of adventures. But by the end, I was like, I don't care about Han at all. And clearly, I know, we're gonna see Han later, so, and we're just gonna again go off the thing because you tell us so movie that he's a great pilot, even though the Kessel Run is pretty cool, although it's a little confusing to understand at times. But beyond that, it's just like, why were you considered a great pilot before the Kessel Run? How did we get to the, hey, you have to fly this thing? Just like, you're not giving me enough, and you're not well done enough to make that okay. So
Wow.
It's not as bad of a film as I thought it was going in. It's just also still not a great film.
Okay.
And it did not, perform as well as I'm sure Disney would have liked it to. And part of that is people were talking about, is it just the film, or is it we're like franchise fatigue? Because we're kind of, and I'm like, you know what? I am, but I'm not. I'd love to see the Leia backstory and how Leia became how awesome she was. Again, want the Leia. It's not that I'm tired of Star Wars. This just wasn't a great film.
Well, and they went with a different timeline, so not movie timeline, but release timeline. So it came out in May rather than Christmas, so they're trying to make it kind of a summer blockbuster, but I don't know that this is the story to do that with. So maybe just...
Yeah, no, there's like a half dozen characters in this film I'd much rather see a movie about than Han. I liked Han the least of like every character, including the bad guy.
Wow.
Just, boring. Just
okay.
Dull guy. So, I apologize. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Han Solo. You got hosed in your prequel.
So, we're going to take a short break and then we'll talk about the adventures, so stay tuned.
Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blanks and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC movie podcast. Our second film today is The Adventurers, which is, I want to say Chinese, but I'm not sure exactly. The main thieves are Chinese, or one of them is mentioned to be from Taiwan, who are being chased by a French detective as they try and steal a very priceless jewel from another man who also seems to speak Chinese, but seems to be in some European country. This film's kind of all over. There's the Chinese group being chased by the French detective, and then at one point we meet a Russian guy. But if we're not speaking Chinese, we seem to always be speaking English for some reason. And you can kind of tell that none of the actors are native English speakers because the way they deliver the lines is sort of stilted, and there's a couple. The closest to native sounding is the woman who plays Amber, but she delivers one line where she sort of inflects on a different word than I think most people would when they're delivering that line for the emotional reason. And I'm just like, okay. The stiltedness of English is taking me out of the story. Why do we have to speak in English? Like, I get, okay, is this maybe because the thieves are Chinese and the detectives are French, and so maybe you don't speak each other's language, and so we all speak English, so we'll communicate in that? Like, it's not clear why we're speaking English, but we are, so...
The French detective is played by Jean Reno, and I don't know if he's typecast, because I've only ever seen him as a French detective. Obviously, he's going to be French because he's French, but...
Well, he's Leon, right?
Leon in what?
The Professional?
I don't think I've seen that.
See, I spent the whole movie staring at him, trying to figure out where I knew him from.
I know him from French Kiss, but you haven't seen that.
No, I haven't. So. I'm pretty sure he's Leon, the Professional, from the movie where the assassin taught Natalie Portman how to kill people.
Oh, yeah, I definitely haven't seen that one.
And Something with a Plant. I saw it and didn't.
Something with a Plant.
I saw it and didn't quite get it, and I'm not quite sure why it's something that people like to reference, but they do, as if it was a super great movie, and I was just sort of like, you took in this kid whose family had been killed and then taught her to kill.
Nice. Yeah, that makes total sense.
Father of the Year. But so anyways...
He was also in the Pink Panther. I forgot about that.
I haven't seen that and don't want to.
No, it's... that would be a dog if you heard that in the background.
So in this, the main character, Andy Lau, has evidently been in jail for the past 5 years. And he gets out, and as he gets out, has a confrontation with the detective, who is sure he's up to no good, and so is trying to follow him and catch him so he can put him back in jail for good. And we get later an explanation of why he's so against him. And he gives this really strange line of how the character's name is Zhang, how Zhang is the worst type of thief because he's patient and has integrity. I'm just
Wait,
like,
what?
Your idea of bad and my idea of bad are a little...
Right. Integrity seems like it should be a good thing.
But we get a whole backstory of why he's very like suspicious of any integral thief. So yeah, Zhang gets out of prison and goes back to thieving, but not because he wants to, but because he's doing it for someone else who, if he fulfills this contract or whatever, will give him information, I guess, about who set him up 5 years ago.
Okay, so this was in your Netflix queue, so let me ask what made you put it in your Netflix queue?
So I believe this came out in 2017, and
yes.
I was just looking at all the films that came out, and it was, I could kind of tell it was probably going to be foreign because Andy Lau and all the actors were foreign. But I was like, hey, cool, foreign heist film. I'm kind of down for that.
Okay.
So I was like, yeah. It's not, the storyline is not too hard to understand since it starts sort of after 5 years, but then we refer back to those 5 years ago. There were a couple of parts where I was confused. And the thing they're after actually has 3 parts, and they've already got like 2 of them somehow. So it's like, what?
So you kind of come into the middle of the process?
Well, he was in the process of stealing the 3 different parts of this necklace when he got caught.
Okay.
So he went to jail, but he hadn't finished the job. So he has to finish the job. And so we've evidently got 1 part already, and we go and get the second one, and then we have to get the third. But we don't. So, like, the necklace thing they're trying to get together is called Gaia. And everyone's like, oh, Gaia? They're stealing Gaia? Oh, my gosh. We never get an explanation of what Gaia is, what Gaia is supposed to do, why we all want Gaia. We don't get that. That's evidently not the point of the movie. Let's just go and do a heist.
Sure.
We don't need to know why you're doing it. Just whatever.
Do it. Just do it. Like Nike.
Yeah. So, he has a sort of protege who is the techie guy, the techie sidekick, whatever, who can like hack into anything. Mm-hmm. And then they also hire this young female to come in, and she and the techie guy start having this, not even it's a love story. He likes her and she's just like refusing to give him the time of day. But it's him trying to figure out who's betrayed him. But then his ex-girlfriend or fiance comes into the picture. And so he starts feeling sort of torn about doing the job, since this was sort of what cost him his fiance to begin with.
Right.
So it's not terrible, but it's not anything super great for the film either. Mm-hmm. Like, there's one scene that involves a lot of people riding motorcycles and mopeds through a forest that I was like, okay, I can't even. Like, at one point, they're trying to catch the people on the front moped. And so, of course, there's this huge security team that had been guarding the jewel that we've just stolen. And so they're all on motorcycles trying to catch them. And so the smart security person decides, hey, let me ride my motorcycle in a jump over the moped people, because that's a cool looking stunt and will totally help me catch them. How? I'm just like, what was the point of that, man? I was like, look, this looks cool, fine, whatever, but worst security team ever if that's what you're busy doing when you should be catching the jewel thief. Like, what? And it's not too hard to follow. I get it, but since you do kind of jump into the middle, you do kind of play catch up of, wait, who's this person? Wait, who's that person? There is
and this is a standalone movie. There's not like a movie that came before it, right?
Not that I know of, but I thought there was at one point, because they referred to something that happened earlier, like we should all know about it. And then we later get sort of a flashback to see what happened. But I was just like, before that flashback, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Is this like part 2 or something? Did I miss the first one? Is this a series of heist films that I haven't seen? Like, as far as I know, this is a solo one, so I could be completely wrong about that. And it doesn't seem too set up for a sequel either. But it was just like, I kind of get who you are and who he is, but you're talking about this thing you both know about that I don't quite know about. Let's just get to the heist. Let's go. And I was so afraid, because the heist goes pretty decently, that it's never too tense of like, oh, are they gonna make it, or pulling the wool over your eyes, like, you know, Ocean's film here, where you think you know what's happening, and then it's like, aha, they were actually tricking you the whole time.
Right.
We never really saw anything like that for most of the film, so I'm just like, this is too easy. This is too simple. I'm looking at the time on the DVD. I was like, please don't end in like next 10 minutes. That was too simple. It was not. We do get a sort of, there's the twist, as you would expect in a heist film, and I was a little surprised by it. But then it was just like, okay. And then the way we resolved that twist, I'm just like, really? Okay. And then I'm left at the end slightly confused over why the villain did what they did, because we never go into that, even though there's clearly a history there. But then B, there's one character that they introduce in the beginning, and he's sort of he makes me think, if you've ever seen, and I've never seen Magnificent Seven, but if you've ever seen Seven Samurai, which Magnificent Seven is based off of, the sort of more silent samurai who can like literally do everything and kills everybody, but like doesn't say almost anything, and then you started seeing that character in a number of action films of like the silent person who can do anything, like in the King Arthur movie with Keira Knightley, that was Tristan, who doesn't talk much but is like the best killer. There's a character like that who I don't think ever actually says anything, but he's sort of their like ace in the hole if a job is going bad, of like, okay, we need you to come in now. And then I'm left at the end confused as to where he is and what happened to him, and did we ever explain what was going on with him? Is he good? Is he bad? Where is he at the end of this film?
He's being quiet, of course.
Like, we don't, unless we need him for a job, he doesn't exist. Like, what? Okay.
Interesting.
So yeah, it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. I think I evidently liked it a bit better than the critics going off of the rating it had. But again, yeah, I'm more so than anything else, I'm just thrown off by the stilted English and just like, but why? You're all over the world, and it's a little... Everyone speaks English except for the Russian guy, who then kind of speaks English, and we know he speaks English, but then we at one point speak Chinese to his interpreter, even though we know he speaks English and we speak English, the main character. And I'm just like, why don't you just speak English to him? You're explaining something, just speak English. We know you can do it. You've been doing it the whole film. So yeah, it's just like, I don't know what's the point of English, and again, I don't know where this film is from. Is it? I doubt it's an American film, but it's just like, what country is this from? Why? I don't... Yeah, okay, fine. Well, like, if it came on, I don't even know if I'd watch it if it came on TV, but I don't feel at the same time, I'm like, man, I so wish I had that, hour 45 back. Dang it.
Right.
It's just like, that was just okay, whatever.
Okay,
so,
good to know. Both
adventuring heist films, not that great. I mean, we need to plan a heist for a good heist film. We need to go steal a good heist film.
Okay,
that will be our heist.
We'll go steal the script for a good heist film.
Let's go steal Lando's capes.
Oh, well, that'd be an interesting adventure.
Yeah. And then I don't know how we'd tie that into The Adventurers, but...
Well, clearly we'd have to get a necklace that went with the cape.
Yes, obviously, accessorizing is super important.
It is, especially, but you don't want to get too crazy with your accessories if you already have a cape.
Moderate, but still, on that, we're way off topic note. We're going to end for today. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Movie Podcast.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.